to men. They seek the man, and not the man them. Question. Yes, we will admit that. But is the Bible inspired? Answer. But still I know of no way to convince anyone of spirit and inspiration, and God only as his reason may take hold of these things. Question. Do you think the Old Testament true? Answer. The story of Eden may be an allegory. The history of the children of Israel may have mistakes. Question. Must inspiration claim infallibility? Answer. It is a mistake to say that if you believe one part of the Bible, you must believe it all. Some of the 39 books may be inspired, others not. Or there may be degrees of inspiration. Question. Do you believe that God commanded the soldiers to kill the children and the married women, and save for themselves the maidens, as recorded in Numbers 31:2? Do you believe that God upheld slavery? Do you believe that God upheld polygamy? Answer. The Bible may be wrong in some statements. God and right cannot be wrong. We must not exalt the Bible above God. It may be that we have claimed too much for the Bible, and thereby given not a little occasion for such men as Mr. Ingersoll to appear at the other extreme, denying too much. Question. What then shall be done? Answer. We must take a middle ground. It is not necessary to believe that the bears devoured the 42 children, nor that Jonah was swallowed by the whale. Third, Reverend Dr. Kohler. Question. What is your opinion about the Old Testament? Answer. I will not make futile attempts of artificially interpreting the letter of the Bible so as to make it reflect the philosophical, moral, and scientific views of our time. The Bible is a sacred record of humanity's childhood. Question. Are you an Orthodox Christian? Answer. No. Orthodoxy, with its face turned backward to a ruined temple or a dead Messiah, is fast becoming like Lot's wife, a pillar of salt. Question. Do you really believe the Old Testament was inspired? Answer. I greatly acknowledge our indebtedness to men like Voltaire and Thomas Paine, whose bold denial and cutting wit were so instrumental in bringing about this glorious era of freedom, so congenial and blissful, particularly to the long abused Jewish race. Question. Do you believe in the inspiration of the Bible? Answer. Of course, there is a destructive axe needed to strike down the old building in order to make room for the grander new. The divine origin claimed by the Hebrews for their national literature was claimed by all nations for their old records and laws as preserved by the priesthood. As Moses, the Hebrew lawgiver, is represented as having received the law from God on the holy mountains, so is Zoroaster the Persian, Manu the Hindu, Minos the Cretan, Lycurgus the Spartan, and Numa the Roman. Question. Do you believe all the stories in the Bible? Answer. All that can and must be said against them is that they have been too long retained around the arms and limbs of grown-up manhood to check the spiritual progress of religion. That by Jewish ritualism and Christian dogmatism they became fetters unto the soul, turning the light of heaven into a misty haze to blind the eye, and even into a hell fire of fanaticism to consume souls. Question. Is the Bible inspired? Answer. True, the Bible is not free from errors, nor is any work of man and time. It abounds in childish views and offensive matters. I trust it will, in a time not far off, be presented for common use in families, schools, synagogues, and churches, in a refined shape, cleansed from all dross and chaff, and stumbling blocks on which the scoffer delights to dwell. Fourth, Reverend Mr. Herford. Question. Is the Bible true? Answer. Ingersoll is very fond of saying, the question is not, is the Bible inspired, but is it true? That sounds very plausible, but you know, as applied to any ancient book, it is simply nonsense. Question. Do you think the stories in the Bible exaggerated? Answer. I dare say the numbers are immensely exaggerated. Question. Do you think that God upheld polygamy? Answer. The truth of which simply is that 4,000 years ago polygamy existed among the Jews, as everywhere else on earth then, and even their prophets did not come to the idea of its being wrong. But what is there to be indignant about in that? And so you really wonder why any man should be indignant at the idea that God upheld and sanctioned that beastliness called polygamy. What is there to be indignant about in that? Fifth, Professor Swing. Question. What is your idea of the Bible? Answer. I think it is a poem. Sixth, Reverend Dr. Ryder. Question. And what is your idea of the sacred scriptures? Answer. Like other nations, the Hebrews had their patriotic, descriptive, didactic, and lyrical poems in the same varieties as other nations. But with them, unlike other nations, whatever may be the form of their poetry, it always possesses the characteristic of religion. Question. I suppose you fully appreciate the religious characteristics of the Song of Solomon? No answer. Question. Does the Bible uphold polygamy? Answer. The law of Moses did not forbid it, and contained many provisions against its worst abuses, and such as were intended to restrict it within narrow limits. Question. So you think God corrected some of the worst abuses of polygamy, but preserved the institution itself? I might question many others, but have concluded not to consider those as members of my Bible class who deal in calumnies and epithets. From the so-called replies of such ministers it appears that, while Christianity changes the heart, it does not improve the manners, and one can get into heaven in the next world without having been a gentleman in this. It is difficult for me to express the deep and thrilling satisfaction I have experienced in reading the admissions of the clergy of Chicago. Surely the battle of intelligent liberty is almost won when ministers admit that the Bible is filled with ignorant and cruel mistakes, that each man has the right to think for himself, and that it is not necessary to believe the Scriptures in order to be saved. From the bottom of my heart I congratulate my pupils on the advance they have made, and hope soon to meet them on the serene heights of perfect freedom. End Ingersoll's response to his critics. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. Ingersoll's response to his critics is part of the book Lectures of Colonel Robert Greene Ingersoll, read for you by Ted DeLorme in Fort Mill, South Carolina, during August 2007.